All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating blueprint for leadership. It comes from the source text, God's Leaders, and you'll see it presents a model that kind of turns our modern ideas about who should be in charge completely on their head. So, let's just start with a big question that hangs over this whole thing. What really makes a great leader? Is it just natural talent, being the smartest person in the room, or just having a powerful personality?
Well, right off the bat, this source draws this incredibly sharp contrast. On one side, you have what we'll call the world's model, which, tends to value things like natural talent, cleverness, and a super strong will. But then, the source's model just flips that script. It points to a God-given calling, a deep sense of humility, and an inner character that's been forged in private. This tension is really at the heart of everything we're about to explore.
So let's jump into the first part of this blueprint, how these leaders are even chosen in the first place. And it all starts with this idea of the unlikely candidate, someone who is defined by a calling, not by their own ambition. One of the most powerful ideas here is that the people who are best suited for this kind of leadership are often the ones who don't even want it. I mean, they're not chasing power, they're not trying to climb the ladder. Instead, they feel this undeniable pull, a calling that they just can't shake. In fact, the source points out this huge internal conflict that almost always happens. The very first reaction of these leaders, we're talking people like Moses at the burning bush or Gideon hiding out in a wine press, is this overwhelming feeling that they're not good enough. Their first thought is, no way, I can't do this, I am the wrong person for the job. But then, right on the heels of that feeling of, I can't, comes this other, even stronger conviction. But I cannot not do this. It's this tug of war between feeling totally weak and feeling an absolutely inescapable call. That's the real starting line for their journey. And this all boils down to what the source calls the test of humility. Just listen to Gideon's own words. He says, "My clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my family." He had to hit that point of recognizing and admitting his own smallness before he could be used for something so much bigger. So in this model, humility isn't a weakness. It's actually the essential first step. Okay, so you've got this unlikely person who feels this call. Now what? How are they prepared? Well, the source argues their training doesn't happen in public. It happens in the shadows, in what it calls the leader's training round, a long period of hidden trials. I mean, the perfect example is Moses, right? He didn't go to some fancy leadership academy. He was sent to the school of waiting. Think about it, 40 years in the desert, just taking care of sheep. But the source shows us that's where the real training happened. That's where he learned patience, faithfulness in the little unseen things, like helping out at a well. And most importantly, that's where he learned to rely on God instead of his own abilities from his time as a prince. So the big takeaway here is that true leadership character isn't built when everyone's watching. It's forged in the quiet, the boring, the unseen moments of life. According to the source, the real test is how you act when you think nobody is looking. That's the true measure of who you are. Okay, so this brings us to the third part. We've got the calling, we've got the training in secret, but what about the person themselves? What are the absolute, non-negotiable character traits that define these leaders when they're in action? The source really zeroes in on three main pillars, and it gives us a perfect example for each one. We have the courage of Joshua, the integrity of David, and the deep, personal sense of responsibility we see in Nehemiah. Let's break each of these down. First up, courage. And for someone like Joshua, this was way more than just being brave on a battlefield. God tells him over and over again, be strong and courageous. This was a command to hold the line against things you can't see, against the people's complaining and discouragement, and against the temptation to just give up. It's a courage that comes from a deep, spiritual place.
Next up is integrity. And David is such a fascinating example here because, let's be honest, the guy was flawed. Big time. And yet, the source points to his integrity because his deepest concern was for God's honor. I mean, think about it. After being hunted by King Saul for years, when Saul finally dies, David genuinely grieves for him. He's not celebrating a personal win. He's mourning the fall of God's anointed king. That's integrity.
And that third pillar is responsibility. Nehemiah's whole story as a leader didn't start because he got a promotion. It started with a broken heart. He just heard a report that the walls of his home city were rubble, and he felt this deep, personal burden to do something about it. His leadership literally grew out of this overwhelming sense of responsibility for his people and for God's reputation. So we've seen the who, the calling, the how, the training, and the what, the character. But what about the why? Why go through all this? Well, our final section gets to the whole point of this leadership model, and it's actually pretty simple. It's not about the leader. The source uses this absolutely beautiful and powerful phrase for the ultimate goal, God's fullness. The point of this kind of leadership isn't to build a brand or a big organization for yourself. No, it's to help move people from a place of spiritual emptiness and brokenness into the abundance of God's complete plan and blessing for them.
And this is such a great way to picture it. You have salvation from and salvation for. Getting the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt, that was salvation from. It was huge, but it was just the starting point. Joshua's entire mission, his whole leadership role, was about salvation for, a purpose, leading them into the promised land. So real leadership isn't just about rescuing people from a bad situation, it's about leading them toward a good one. At the end of the day, that's the whole ballgame. The goal for this kind of leader is to help people experience and grow into this fullness. It's about seeing people restored, living in their purpose, and flourishing the way they were designed to. The leader, they're just a guide on that journey.
And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on, doesn't it? If this blueprint is right, if leadership isn't really about a title or a position on an org chart, but it's about a calling and character and a purpose bigger than yourself, then what could that kind of influence look like in your own life, right where you are? Thanks for digging into this with us.